So we're here at an interesting debate. This has been a new addition to the annual academic sessions where we have medical students from two universities battling out at a interesting and controversial topic of choice. Now, cannabis, the plant's history first began in Asia, but much of the continent remain in a position where they have not legalized cannabis yet. And Thailand became the first country in Asia to legalize the growing and trading of cannabis for medicinal purposes. Now, in the light of that, we are going to be debating today between the faculties of Colombo and Sri Jayewardenepura on the topic of cannabis use should be legalized in Sri Lanka. And proposing this notion from the medical faculty of Colombo, if I'm to introduce the speakers, Fatima Nuha Kasim, Minul Doluvira, and Lukman Shafi, while opposing this notion are the medical students from the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Senara Vidhanapatirana, Lakshika Vartharaja, and Amira Izzadeen. So let's give them a welcome. So the rules and regulations, each speaker, during the first round, each speaker will have 7 minutes. You will have 7 minutes. I will indicate to you when you have 1 minute left to go. The second round, each speaker, each leader will have 4 minutes to wind up. The speaker not holding the floor may not rise during a speech unless it is to offer a point of information. The point of information can be offered between the first and the 7th minute of the first round of speech. You can use it to make a short point or ask a question of the speaker. It should be brief and should not last longer than 15 seconds. Now, we are very strict with the time. 7 minutes for your first round. If you go over time, you will be penalized by our judges, who today will be Professor Shehan Williams and Dr. Asili Rodrigo, experts in the field of debating, and well-known fact that they've been at this, debating much like you all, and still continue to debate if you witnessed last year's academic sessions. Right, so without taking much time, cannabis use should be legalized in Sri Lanka. To propose this notion, Ms. Fatima Nuha Kasim from Colombo. Over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for interrupting your lunch, but if you could just think that we live in a society where patients are suffering with debilitating diseases resulting in chronic pain. We live in a society where communities are in danger because they are a hotbed for illegal and illicit activities, not necessarily because of the drug itself, but because of its illegality. We live in a society where children are at risk because even though they do not want to use it, they are under peer pressure to use it, and the drugs that they use have toxic and impure substances which cause severe harm. So we as Side Proposition truly believe that the legalization of marijuana is the solution to all of this. So now context. We see that in the past few years, there is an increasing trend for countries to legalize marijuana, and we believe as Side Proposition that we wish to take advantage of this rising tide. Countries that have legalized marijuana include Canada, South Africa, some states in the United States. We would now like to go through the definite advantages as well as the suspected advantages of marijuana use. So the definite advantages that we know of are its use in chronic pain management as an antiemetic drug for chemotherapy side effects. We use it to decrease muscular spasms in multiple sclerosis. And the CDC even approves it for epileptic patients, especially in the pediatric wards. I think an interesting sort of follow-up question that arises is, why isn't existing pain medication satisfactory? Well, we have a threefold answer. The first of which is the high addiction rates of currently existing opioids. A review article in the Journal of Pain Research went on to say that the addiction rate of currently prescribed opioids, marijuana, goes to, let me rephrase. A review article in the Journal of Pain Research went on to say that the dependency rate of marijuana is 9%. So this is comparable. This is actually significantly less than prescribed opioid medication that is used in chronic pain, as well as medication used for alcohol users and nicotine users. As a result, when you have very limited therapeutic options, patients who suffer from chronic pain rarely are satisfied with their quality of life. A survey went on to say that 80% of people tended to opt for cannabis as opposed to opioids, and 92% preferred the less side effects of cannabis as opposed to opioids. Interestingly, over 50% of drug-induced anaphylaxis is also due to weaker medication in existence, such as NSAIDs. So this is why we feel that currently existing medications is not satisfactory, and that marijuana would be a good alternative to this. Recreational cannabis also provides its own set of benefits, which includes a sense of euphoria, a sense of well-being, relaxation, etc. Right, so now we come to the model of our argument. Side proposition believes that the legalization of marijuana should come through in two specific ways, which includes a retail license, that is a license to sell or make marijuana purchasable, and a license to grow a specific crop. Then we come to a distinction. So what is interesting and that what we would like to point out is the fact that THC, the specific compound in marijuana that causes psychoactive component, which is the psychoactive component, we would sort of regulate that, have a regulatory body where that would be sort of set at a constant rate in the distribution networks that we have. So we would have a distinction and regulation there. Additionally, in terms of implementation, side proposition believes that purchasing power should be available to adults above 18, but medically prescribed marijuana would be available for younger people as well. We would have NMRA approval. We would have awareness campaigns very similar to cigarette smoking, and this would include mandatory health warning labels. We would promote any mode of administration except smoking the marijuana, and it should be sold everywhere. We want it to be an accessible drug that does not only comply to like teachers of the society. Right, then we come to our burdens of proof. We believe that currently the benefits of legalizing marijuana far outweigh the costs, and even if this were to be disproved in the future, as of right now, we believe that the freedom of choice is an integral right that cannot be violated in our current democracy. Right, coming to our arguments, the first argument that we have is ethical obligation of healthcare workers. The first level of analysis that I have underneath that is so in that, we come across the concept of beneficence. As healthcare workers, how can you all stand there and step aside while there is a good alternative to currently highly addictive opioids in the market? Secondly, autonomy, which blends into our argument of freedom of choice. The patient has the right to choose or refuse treatment. This is very similar to Jehovah's Witnesses, where they no, thank you, madam. Where they refuse the right to obtain blood transfusions post an accident. So if that is allowed, we would extend this to marijuana use as well. Secondly, treating related health problems as an addiction and not a crime. Now, this is important because it validates actual mental problems that people in society pose. So, a good example for this is is suicide, for example. So, when that was decriminalized, we had much more people coming forward and saying, "Look, we need help," and they were not being penalized for having those thoughts in the first place, and therefore we were able to reach a greater audience. Right. Then we come to our second level of analysis, which is precedence. There is already legal precedence in the form of opioid, stronger therapeutic drugs. So we believe that because there is a legal precedent, marijuana too should be made legal. And additionally, we think it enables further research by allowing more people to sort of use it and conduct large-scale studies, and we believe that it is a step in the right direction. We know that the College of Psychiatrists in Sri Lanka decriminalized homosexuality a few years ago, and this in itself is, we feel, is an objective outlook into society as a whole, and by allowing this, we feel that our society will sort of progress in the right direction. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, Side Proposition firmly believes that medical marijuana as well as recreational marijuana should be legalized. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kasim. Over to our opposition, Ms. Senara Vidanapatirana. Stage is yours.
Starting at 3, 2, 1. An intoxicated community, road traffic accidents, hospital admissions, a low IQ youth, and an ill society with psychotics roaming around the streets. Ladies and gentlemen, debaters of the House, this is the world that Team Proposition proposes, ladies and gentlemen. As Team Opposition leader, let me prove to you as to what the status quo in the country is right now. First off, we have the Opium, Dangerous Drugs and Poison Act, under which cannabis usage as a recreational drug is banned. And secondly, we have the Ayurveda Act number 31 of 1961, under which authorized Ayurvedic practitioners and licensed farmers can store and prescribe cannabis as a medication, which is why you can purchase it over the counter as Madana Modaka, right? So what we believe as Team Opposition is that this form of restricted legalization is what we need. We need status quo, and we'll be proving to you as we require status quo throughout the debate today. Moving on to the case division of Team Opposition, firstly we'll be proving to you as to how regularized legalization is not pragmatic in Sri Lanka. Secondly, we'll be proving to you how it's not worth sacrificing the physical and mental well-being of our community for a fickle economic benefit. And secondly, my second and third speakers will also be proving to you as to how there are health hazards in terms of physical and mental well-being in terms of cannabis. And thirdly, we'll be proving to you how cannabis is a gateway drug. And fourthly, we'll be proving to you how accessibility increases. And finally, we'll be proving to you how cannabis increases dependency, addiction, and the social and cultural issues that are associated with it, which will be explained by my second and third speakers further. Moving on to the case division of Team Opposition. First off, regulated legalization is not pragmatic in Sri Lanka. We require a controlled cultivation and supervised use of cannabis, as you mentioned, with proper mechanisms, laws, and policies in place, right? But we require restrictions in terms of age gap, in terms of age group, content, and composition, ladies and gentlemen. But the issue with Sri Lanka is that we are a highly corrupted country, right? We have corrupted government, we have corrupted individuals in our country. Best example, consultant physician Dr. Anula Vijayasundara stated that expressions of certain prominent politicians promoting cannabis is in stark contrast to the government policy on narcotic control. So what she mentioned was that it is our own prominent corrupt politicians who are promoting cannabis in the first place while it is legalized in the country. So do you think, after legalizing cannabis, do you think that these people will follow all these restrictions? Will we be able to regulate it as you say, ladies and gentlemen? So this is just a utopian, ideological situation that you are portraying out there. Moving on, in European countries, ladies and gentlemen, a massive amount of money is provided for law enforcement. For example, 3.4% of the budget of Canada is for proper monitoring of drugs, right? But in Sri Lanka, not even 1/10 of it is going for law enforcement and proper monitoring, right? We only put 0.2% of our budget towards law enforcement, right? Moving on, when you take the current situation of our country, right, do you think that cannabis is the best option we have? Because according to the short Oxford textbook of psychiatry, it directly mentions that cannabis is a drug that exaggerates the pre-existing mood, right? Whether it's exhilaration or depression, right? So it exaggerates the pre-existing mood, right? So in a country where we are in political turmoil, do we require a drug? Do we require a drug that enhances the pre-existing mood, ladies and gentlemen? Because our people are already in so much stress. We are already in borderline depression. You give them a drug that enhances the pre-existing mood. It will only increase about the anxiety and depression among our community, right? So this will cause even more chaos. And what we're speaking about is healing the trouble during troubled times, right? We are not supposed to cause more trouble during troubled times, ladies and gentlemen, right? Moving on. For example, if you take Australia, Australia decriminalized the use of cannabis, right? But what ended up happening was they decriminalized only for the use of medical purposes. But what ended up happening was people took GP prescriptions, right? And they ended up buying cannabis for recreational use, right? So even in a country where they have proper law enforcement, they restrict it because it is an addictive substance. And team opposition leader came up and said that it is not an addictive substance, it's less addictive than opioids. Come on, you know how much people strive for the need of cannabis, right? So you need another addictive substance. I do not think we need another addictive substance in the picture, ladies and gentlemen. Later, moving on to the second argument by team opposition. It is not worth sacrificing the physical and mental well-being of our community for a fickle economic benefit. Is it okay if I not? Ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the second argument of team opposition. Right? It is not worth sacrificing the physical and mental well-being of our community for a fickle economic benefit. Right? Because number one, it has a larger burden on our healthcare system than the tax revenue that you get. Right? For example, in the US, 10% of new hospital admissions has increased purely after the legalization of cannabis, as it is shown in the statistics right here, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on in Sri Lanka, as proven by Ranavira et al. In 2015, they had calculated the cost of tobacco and alcohol, leaving aside the psychosocial impact, right? So they found out that the total economic cost of tobacco-related cancers and alcohol-related conditions was 121 million US dollars, and in terms of alcohol was 885 million US dollars just in the year 2015. And they concluded that this sum of money can be used to build another Mattala airport, ladies and gentlemen. So we already have so much trouble with two legal intoxicating substances. Do we need another? We do not, ladies and gentlemen. Besides, the psychosocial stress that people go through, the families, the domestic violence, meanwhile, and the abuse that you go through because of this intoxicating substance, can you even compare it to a fickle economic benefit, right? We can't. This will basically be understood by the clinicians and the social workers we have here today. You will definitely understand how much psychosocial distress this drug causes. Moving on, cannabis as an export drug is definitely not going to work out either. And the reason for this is that the global market is already saturated by the cannabis produced by Canada, Mexico, and USA. So I believe we've proven to you that legalization of cannabis is not going to work out currently. And my second and third speakers will be explaining the argument further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Vidhana Pathiran. A very aggressive rebuttal there. Minu Doluvira of Colombo, it's your turn now. You have 7 minutes.
They say that cannabis exaggerates the existing modes of people, that it causes so much psychosocial harm. But what psychosocial harm? They didn't give a single example, a single case report, or any sort of evidence for us to show that cannabis is a bad thing. On the contrary, we gave you in our first speech cases, tangible cases where people are relieved from chronic pain. And we as doctors or medical students have an obligation, an inherent moral obligation to not just wait while someone is suffering in pain and offer them some kind of solution. And we're doing that while opposition is just waiting around. They say that they say that it's not as addictive as opioids. That shows how poor their research is, because opioids is so notorious for being addictive, and cannabis, especially CBD, one of the active compounds, is not addictive at all. And we, by virtue of having the NMRA approve all of our, the timer has a problem there. The NMRA, by virtue of approving it, we can ensure that it's controlled and it's not as addictive as proposition wants to portray. And they keep on saying, tobacco and alcohol has had such a bad effect on our country. Well, and yet they're doing nothing about it either. Tobacco and alcohol is legal in Sri Lanka because there are certain benefits to it. There is tax revenue, and beyond that, just people have an inherent right to live and choose the way they want to live. And as insofar as they are not harming other people, as long as they are rational and making informed decisions, we as governments or we as professional organizations have no right to tell another person how to live their life. We are simply there to advise based on evidence, and side opposition gave us absolutely no evidence at all. And that is why, legalizing homosexuality was an evidence-based decision that was made by the College of Psychiatrists. It was evidence-based despite there being so much retaliation in our culture, despite it being as having as bad a reputation as cannabis use. So this is simply in that line of making progressive change. So having decimated their case, let's move on to my first argument on, I have two arguments for the House. Firstly, on how we're making better regulation, which is what both of us want, and secondly, on how we're in fact improving our economy. So the first argument on better regulation. How are we achieving this? Firstly, understand that side opposition's case is horrible because cannabis is the most misused illegal drug right now, with 600,000 people from our population already using cannabis actively. So they have a huge problem on their side that they are not addressing. On the contrary, we are addressing that. How? Because we're breaking the black market. We're crippling the black market. How? Because now no one would go to the illegal, the very shady people in the black market and buy illegal drugs that are probably laced with very toxic chemicals, because now they have legal vendors in your pharmacy, in your supermarket. So what happens then? The black market loses its pull. It loses its funding. Why is this good? Because it is this black market that funds all those dirty politicians that side opposition has a problem with. So thank you for making that argument for us. Secondly, it is the same black market that funds all these mobs, all these gangsters that are terrorizing our streets. And yes, we have friends with a brothel right down their lane. They can't, you see, so many motorcycle shootings and bodies washing up across our shore. That is because of these black market and these criminals. So we are effectively crippling them because we are cutting down on their funding. Furthermore, we are also giving safer products. Why? Because this is going to be NMRA approved. This is going to be sold by people with licenses. On the contrary, in their case, we have shady people in black market selling these to our children, to our friends, and because of this, they're getting highly addictive forms of cannabis. Why? Because the black market wants to keep their market going on. They want people to keep on buying it, so they want people to get addicted. So they inherently have... yes, madam?
So you said the black market will not be able to survive, but when it becomes legalized, it becomes cheaper, so won't the black market thrive therefore?
No, the black market won't be the one selling it. It'll be actual, industries that are built in Sri Lanka for legal cannabis vending,
POIs,
not the, I won't be taking any more POIs, not the black market, so they lose their funding. And beyond this, as I was saying, it provides clean products with less addictive, less toxic impurities. Moving on to my final argument about the economic impact. We are living in a time of crisis. We have people dying in the petrol queues. We have people with unemployment and those without. All of this is because we don't have foreign revenue. So what is the solution? Get foreign revenue, give people jobs. So how do we do this? Number one, we tax the industry of cannabis. How? Firstly, there will be multinational corporations coming to Sri Lanka to sell cannabis. We can tax them easily. Furthermore, and secondly, more importantly, is we can build a cannabis industry of our own. Why? Because Sri Lanka has the perfect climate, the perfect soil to grow cannabis. And the proof of this is the fact that we already have 500 hectares of cannabis in use right now for the Ayurvedic industry. The biggest exporters of cannabis are Morocco and India and Pakistan with similar soil and climates. So if we can produce cannabis, first of all, we provide job opportunities for all those unemployed people. And the good thing is, this is not skilled labor. You just need to transport this. You just need to cultivate as farmers. So these people don't need to, go through a six-year degree like we do, and they can just, get employed, right? So thirdly, regarding the cannabis tourism, actually, because we see Netherlands, Thailand, these countries are flourishing because tourists, especially from the Western areas, are coming to these countries to have this adventure, to experiment this, especially since it's illegal, most probably, in many of their countries. So this is the perfect example for us to get that foreign revenue as well. Because of these reasons, we're actually saving Sri Lanka's economic crisis as well. So in summary, cannabis has so many health benefits that were absolutely untouched by side opposition. We are actually breaking the black market. We're achieving the better regulation that side opposition wants. We're building a better economy. And for all of these reasons, we urge you to side with side prop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doluvira. Very confident comeback from the proposition. It's Ms. Lakshika Vartharajastan, the second speaker from Sri Jayavardenepura. It's yours. Stage is yours.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So as responsible team opposition, it's our duty to explain to you how baseless and groundless is the motion put forward by the team proposition. So first of all, I'd like to explain my points of view about why that motion is not sustainable. First, with legalization of cannabis, accessibility increases, including to the community and children. So increased accessibility will which can cause dependence, will lead to a community which will become dependent to cannabis. Second, cannabis is a gateway drug to other hard drugs like opioids and also alcohol and tobacco. So, with the increase in use of cannabis, there will be inevitable increase in the use of alcohol, tobacco, and other narcotics. So, this has been proved by a research in New Zealand, which showed that people who use cannabis are 60 times more prone to use other narcotics and alcohol and tobacco. So, they asked for stats, and we are giving them more stats. And also, currently, the concentration of tetrahydrocannabinol in the cannabis has been increased from 1% in 1960s to 30%. And this increased dosage, what can it do? It can cause hypertension, cardiac arrhythmia, cerebrovascular accidents, circulatory collapse. So all these increased in harmful health hazards, and they are talking about some unproved medicinal benefits which can be achieved by other treatments. So next, cannabis is also can cause tolerance, and with increased usage, it can cause addiction. And when the community becomes dependent on cannabis, we cannot revoke the legalization which happened in USA in 1920s, where they tried to revoke they tried to prohibit alcohol use, and they couldn't buy because there was increased opposition. And there was increased opposition, increased gang crimes, increased criminal wars. So ultimately, they couldn't prohibit alcohol in USA. So if we legalize cannabis now, in a few decades, we cannot even revoke the legalization. So before legalization, they should seriously research about the harmful effects of cannabis before bringing it out to the society.
Point, ma'am.
Please. And next, cannabis has also shown to increase the risk of schizophrenia, psychosis, insomnia, anorexia, depression, anxiety. All these risks because of, and they are talking about some unproven medical benefits. Therefore, by legalizing cannabis in a country which can't invest or increase the law and enforcement, we are making the people vulnerable to various other physical diseases. Physical well-being and economy are two interrelated things, and team proposition should understand that, and one cannot thrive without another. The physical well-being should be important for the growth and development of the economy. Now, coming to their point, they first said that they are going to give a regulated use of cannabis. Our team opposition captain definitely proved that in a country in the current economic and political turmoil, we cannot impose regulated use of cannabis. And second, they talked about how this cannabis can relieve the healthcare system. Wow, what a joke. We have listed out a list of psychological and physical impact which will give burden to the healthcare system in different aspects. So how are they telling that healthcare system will be relieved by the legalization of cannabis? Next, they talked about children becoming addicted to cannabis because of peer pressure. Now, the cannabis is illegal in country. So if we make it legal, about it be more accessible to children? According to research data, children can access alcohol and tobacco more than cannabis, which are legal currently. So therefore, obvious legalization of cannabis will increase the accessibility even to children, which can increase cognitive impairment and decrease concentration powers of children, which increases school dropout rates, especially which has been proven by researchers done in USA. Then, please sit down. Then they were talking about black market. A research done in Canada, which legalized cannabis 3 years ago, showed that still more than 50% of purchases are done through black market. So still legalizing or not, black market is going to thrive. So you can't talk about black market here. And then they are talking about how cannabis can bring economic income to the country. First, currently, globally, the largest powerful holders of cannabis industries are USA, Canada, and Mexico. With such powerful countries which have large cultivations, how Sri Lanka, with a minor cultivation, is going to go and compete in a global economy? Already our tea and rubber products are failing, and we are going to go and introduce a new plant and compete with such established markets. Is it possible? Please think team proposition before putting forward such baseless policies. And therefore, they also talked about the beneficial effects of cannabis, which we have already showed that there are more harmful effects than beneficial effects from the cannabis. And also, I would also like to add that cannabis can also increase the road traffic accidents and also industrial accidents and promote absenteeism amongst workers. And also they talked about how cannabis can increase tax revenue, and our speaker already proved to you that how we spend 10 times more than the tax revenue from alcohol and tobacco, and it will be much higher when we legalize cannabis. So all their arguments, including the beneficial effects, is more than risk is failing. Second, their regulated selling is also failing. And third, how healthcare system can be relieved by legalizing cannabis is also failing. And fourth, their increased economic income due to cannabis is also failing. So thereby disproving all their arguments, we strongly state that legalizing cannabis is not the correct decision to Sri Lanka at the current moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Varatharaja. We now move on to Luqman Shafi, the last speaker of the proposition of Team Colombo.
Thank you, Madam. Distinguished judges, ladies and gentlemen, I happen to be a fan of Shakespeare. And I think Shakespeare in Macbeth summed up opposition's argument quite succinctly. Full of sound and fury, but signifying nothing. See, ladies and gentlemen, we, proposition, brought to you a model. We brought to you the benefits of cannabis, and we, quite nicely to the opposition, also brought its side effects. We talked about how we could control it. We talked about how we could regulate it. We talked about the economic benefits. We talked about our duty as medical professionals. We talked about how we can regulate cannabis in a way that will offer economic benefits to Sri Lanka while still serving a societal benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, we did all this. Proposition addressed none of it. They told us that our system will not work. They did not tell us why. They talked about corrupt politicians. They did not tell the various different harms which cannabis causes. But then we addressed that, ladies and gentlemen. They talked about how THC levels has increased. But that THC level increase has directly correlated with the war on drugs. It is simply the fact that we have tried to unfairly regulate cannabis in a way that harms the weakest within our society, that has led to these organizations moving into our poor communities and trying to take over, where they are under police so that they can benefit from this poor policing and increase THC levels and and lead to stronger drug markets. And we addressed that, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about how regulating it properly, how introducing it as a legal drug within Sri Lanka will create an export market that will be within capitalistic control. It means that people will access cannabis in a legal way. It means that people will try to access illegal cannabis less. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not simply stating this, for the sake of argument. This was backed up by the University of California in a study that was published in the British Medical Journal. Within the year 2002, within Britain, there was a fall from 55% to 17% in access to more dangerous illicit drugs when there was a limited legalization of marijuana. We observed similarly that this same study also brought about social cost argument. That is, that at the end of the day, it costs more for our societies. It costs more for our governments to try and control this drug. Ladies and gentlemen, think about marijuana. Having access to some amount of marijuana will put you in jail. This means that if you are an addict, you will not seek rehabilitation. We see this in suicide as well, ladies and gentlemen, because when we legalized suicide within Sri Lanka in 1997, the number of people who were seeking rehabilitation for their suicidal thoughts increased. Sri Lanka's suicide rate, which had octupled from 1950 to 1995, halved within a decade. This is what we can do by legalizing marijuana, ladies and gentlemen. This is what is possible. And they talked about how marijuana has some negative effects, ladies and gentlemen, but negative effects which first affects a very, very, very minor percentage of the Sri Lankan population. We calculated it to less than 66% of people suffering from psychosis. So 66,000 people out of 22 million suffering from psychosis. An even smaller percentage use cannabis. The number of people who are going to experience the negative effects is so minute that we cannot pass a generalized ban on this substance. Ladies and gentlemen, do we ban jumbo peanuts just because some people suffer from peanut allergies? No. We try to regulate it. We educate people. We keep it under control. And we can do that. We have shown that we can do that. Why do you not believe in Sri Lanka's spirit? They talked about how US and Canada cannot cultivate marijuana. Then how can Sri Lanka? Ladies and gentlemen, one very simple answer. It's one word: climate. We have the heat, we have the water, we have the soil to grow marijuana. So we can cultivate it. We don't try to ban marijuana in Sri Lanka because some foreign countries don't grow it. That's not the way of opportunism. We have to see they can't grow it. So we'll sell it to them and make that money. Ladies and gentlemen, that is one thing. And the other thing being that they talked about these negative effects, which are first, as I said, first affect a very small percentage of the population, and secondly, tend to be mostly unproven. Ladies and gentlemen, as medical students, we know about Rugger. Rugger has known microconcussive negative effects on people's health, right? They are suffering from microconcussions. They have negative mental effects as a result of Rugger. Do we ban Rugger? No, we improve protective equipment. We improve training. We improve the regimens so that we can still enjoy this while still having all the positive side effects, all the health effects that it offers. At the end of the day, it is about control, and we believe legalization gives us that level of control. They are not saying that let's try to help people. They're saying let's punish people, let's take away their freedom of choice. We believe that people at the end of the day have the right to make informed decisions according to their own mental faculties and according to what they believe is right and according to their overall health, ladies and gentlemen. Our solution to this issue is very, very simple. Legalize marijuana, tax it, regulate it, put it under control, educate people. By doing so, they talked about children coming in contact with marijuana. We will reduce it this way. They talked about the culture surrounding marijuana. We will make it better this way. We can ameliorate the problems we face today only by understanding that this is an issue that we face and by legalizing it and taking the appropriate regulatory measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafi. Very confident and aggressive attack on the opposition. Mira Izzadeen, your 7 minutes is up to oppose the notion made by the proposition.
Thank you, Madam. Dear Sir, third speaker of Team Proposition, you're living in a dream world, aren't you? So now, if you take the arguments that you mentioned, first of all, freedom of choice. We are not giving the people freedom of choice if we do not legalize cannabis. Now, we all have choices. If we want to kill someone, we can kill someone. But we do not. Why don't we? Because we had that inner conscience. We have a social contract where we decide we will not hurt another person, so they will not hurt us in order for us to live in a peaceful society. So if we give cannabis to every single person who wants it, if we give that freedom of choice, we will not have that peaceful society anymore. We will have violent people, we'll have violent, ill community. So therefore, we won't be having that kind of peace and harmony that we have right now. And if we take the second argument about suicide decriminalization versus suicide due to cannabis-induced depression, but when we decriminalize suicide, the rates of suicide decreased according to side proposition. But why don't we take into consideration suicide caused due to depression due to cannabis? That can also increase, and that will increase when cannabis is legalized. Then if we take euphoria versus anxiety and depression, Team Proposition constantly mentioned euphoria, that once you take cannabis, you will get euphoric. They constantly refuse to consider that cannabis will heighten an emotion you are already in. It won't just give you euphoria like that. If you're depressed, it will heighten your depression. If you're angry, it will heighten your anger. So if you take that into consideration, what kind of community do you think we will be living in if we do legalize cannabis? And then if we take the third speaker's arguments once again, peanut allergy, sir? Peanut allergy. You're comparing peanut allergy to psychosis? You can't do that. So if you consider the minute amount, as you mentioned, 62,000 people getting out of 22 million, even if those people do get psychosis and even if they do seek help, it is a burden to the healthcare system, which the healthcare system does not have to undergo if they do not legalize cannabis. We should not give the burden on the healthcare professionals. You all are healthcare professionals. You all will be healthcare professionals. Do you all want such sit down? Do you all want such burden? We can prevent the burden on the healthcare system, the amount of work and the amount of money that goes to it if we do not legalize cannabis. And you all are speaking about a theoretical state of mind. You all are not speaking about it practically. You all are saying, okay, we can legalize cannabis. We can do this. But you all are not thinking about what will happen if you all do legalize cannabis. Putting an economic benefit over the benefit of the people, of the community, you all can't just think like medical professionals or medical students. You'll have to think like human beings as well. We have to put the area we live in, the country we live in first. You all can't just think about how it'll help a few select people. We should help all people in general. Utilitarianism, think about all the people that you live in. Think about, you can't think about one single person only. And then if you take the next argument that the third speaker brought up was that we have the perfect soil, we have the perfect environment to grow cannabis. We have all that, but we do not have the capital. What we need is money. What we need is a labor force to begin with. We lack that. Sri Lanka lacks that. So it's of no use if you start creating cannabis right now. And then if we go to the second speaker's arguments, he brought up an argument where if you, he compared it to alcohol and the tobacco industry where we gained a lot of economic benefit. But once again, how much burden is the healthcare system undergoing because of the alcohol and tobacco industry? How much of a trouble is the people that are living around the people who consume alcohol and consume tobacco undergoing? Why are we thinking about them? Why are we only thinking about the people who do consume these things? Why are we thinking about the people who undergo the after effects, like the families, the children, the neighbors? Every single person has to be, you should think about every single person before you make a decision. And then if you go to the next argument that Team Proposition brought up, you all said that the criminal penalties for cannabis use harms the users and the community, so they won't be able to live a better life. But once again, we would like to say that as Team Opposition, the burden on the community should not be forgotten. We can't only think about the people who take cannabis. We can't only think about the people who consume these narcotics. We have to think about the people who are surrounding them, the people who are actually affected, because they are worried, they are scared, they don't know what to do. And then, if we talk about the arguments that team opposition would like to bring up for for not legalizing cannabis. So I will be reiterating my first and second speaker by emphasizing on the social and cultural issues of legalizing cannabis. As mentioned in the shorter Oxford textbook of psychiatry, there has been concern that cannabis use among the youth might increase the risk of other poor psychosocial outcomes. Like my second and first speaker mentioned, there are so many health hazards which you all refuse to accept. You reading Shakespeare, team proposition, is the reason why you don't have enough research. Research, learn, then comment on. So, let me continue. So, now, let me inform you about the health hazards in case I've forgotten or you all don't know. So we have mood and anxiety disorders, cognitive impairment, poor educational performances, job instability, traffic accidents which have increased, and an uptake of more harmful illegal drugs, all which was continuously mentioned by the first and second speakers of team opposition. So now, these will also lead to psychological and physical addiction, as mentioned before. This results in dependent individuals withdrawing from society. Now, the youth is the one that is most affected, and the youth is the main labor force of our country, the decision makers and the leaders of our future. But their numbers will keep decreasing if cannabis is legalized. So due to these psychosocial effects, Sri Lanka will be prone to a more ill and a violent community, as I mentioned before, where social security decreases. Therefore, efficiency of the country will decrease. For example, you can take the Amsterdam mugging, which happened in 2021. And if you take the cultural issues, ladies and gentlemen, we live in Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka is a conservative, cultured country. We live in a multicultural society filled with many religions. And we all have basic values which will be degraded with the legalization of cannabis. And it'll be worse than the struggle that happened in 2019. And now, the theme of this event is healing the trouble during troubled times. So I would like to ask team proposition, are you all planning on healing them or ruining them? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Izzadeen. So we come to the end of the first round, where each speaker had 7 minutes. We move to the second round, where we give 4 minutes to each of the leaders. 4 minutes on the clock, please. And first up is Ms. Sanara Vidanapatirana from Team Opposition to wind up their arguments.
Ladies and gentlemen, debaters of the House, this debate has been revolving around few main clashes. First off, a utopian peaceful society that will come along with cannabis versus the psychosocial distress, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, euphoria that you get with cannabis versus the obvious heightenment of the current state of mood that you have that brings about anxiety and depression in a country that is already stressed and depressed, ladies and gentlemen. Right? So as team opposition, we came up with a series of arguments. First off, we proved to you that regulated legalization is not pragmatic in our country, right? We proved to you that we have corruption in this way and this form, right? It was not addressed at all. You did not come here and tell us how we are going to regulate this. You said, yes, we can regulate. You didn't tell us how. Right? Moving on, secondly, we proved to you that it is not worth sacrificing the physical and mental well-being of our community for this economic benefit that you speak of, for this tax revenue that you speak of. It is not worth sacrificing the mental health of our community. It is not worth it to sacrifice our future generation for the fickle economic benefit that you speak of. Do we need a future generation with bronchitis, with lung cancer? No, right? So, once again, even that argument was not addressed at all. You did not address the fact that there are so many health hazards that come along with cannabis, right? Thirdly, the psychosocial distress that comes in families that are affected by cannabis users, by having intoxicated parents in your families. What about the domestic violence? We spoke of this, but you did not address it at all. You simply came and said, we will have a peaceful community with no black market, ladies and gentlemen. But once again, we proved to you that by legalizing cannabis, the accessibility would be high, and we would be having more cannabis users roaming around the streets. We would be having more psychotics roaming around the streets, right? And this would definitely affect the social security that we have. And once again, not addressed. Moving on, we mentioned to you time and time again that cannabis is a gateway drug. It will lead to heroin addiction, to cocaine addiction, right? But you did not address it at all. You simply disregarded the fact that we mentioned it. right? Moving on, we mentioned that accessibility will be high, right? We mentioned that with accessibility, usage will be high and hence addiction will be high, right? But you came and you also said that accessibility will be high. Well, yes, thank you for providing us with our own arguments, right? Moving on, we mentioned that there is dependence, that there is tolerance along with cannabis, right? And that will lead to addiction and other social and cultural issues. Once again, you did not address it at all. You simply came and said it will just bring about a very peaceful society. Moving on to the series of bogus arguments brought about by team proposition. First off, you came and said we should tax, we should regulate. We proved to you why regulation is not going to work out in our country because of the corrupt system that we have. Secondly, we proved to you that the tax revenue is not worth the burden on our healthcare system, right? Secondly, you came up and spoke about all these medical benefits, which my second and third speakers proved to you time and time again as to have many other treatments in place. When you have so many other treatments instead of cannabis, why should you go for cannabis, which is a drug which has so many health hazards, right? So once again, we've broken that argument too. Thirdly, you came up and kept on talking about how people need this euphoria. Ladies and gentlemen, people do not need anxiety and depression as well, do they? So might as well stay away from the euphoria. Moving on, you came and said that implementation is quite good. Once again, you did not give us a model as to how you're going to implement it. You just came and said, we can implement, we can regulate, we can tax, right? You never gave us a model as to how you're planning on implementing it wonderfully, right? And then you said, the captain of team opposition came and said that accessibility will increase. And then the third speaker came and said that accessibility will decrease, right? So don't contradict within your own team, ladies and gentlemen, right? And then you kept on talking about the freedom of choice, which my third speaker successfully broke by mentioning to you as to how we have a social contract. We give up on certain rights for a peaceful society. We give up on certain rights for the benefit of the many, right? Moving on to the black market argument, ladies and gentlemen. In the black market argument, so I believe we've proven to you as to why cannabis legalization is definitely not going to work in Sri Lanka. And I believe that we do side with side opposition. We have definitely won this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siddhana Patirana. We move to the team proposition to wind up their case on the notion that cannabis use should be legalized in Sri Lanka. You have 4 minutes.
Members of the House, we've been in this debate because side opposition have not done their research. All the arguments were vague points like, oh, it heightens their mood, oh, it causes psychosocial effects. But where are the facts? Where is the research? I am asking you one simple question. I'm asking this now because they were too scared to take any of our points of information. If cannabis was so bad, if it had no health benefits, if it had so many bad effects to your mood and everything, why are so many countries increasingly legalizing cannabis? Why the USA, South Africa, Canada, Thailand, so many countries are increasingly legalizing it? Why are we even having this debate in the first place if there wasn't a debate to talk about? There weren't benefits. I might add, none of our benefits are actually counted. How it protects, how it increases, how it helps people with chronic pain, the spasticity reduction in multiple sclerosis, and as an anti-emetic in chemotherapy drugs. None of this were addressed. But what I might add, several levels in the econ argument were mainly addressed by the simple argument, oh, you can't prioritize the economy over people's lives. Madam, people are dying because the economy is failing, so you can't just disregard the economy. Secondly, because I'll also show that medicinally itself, cannabis is not as bad as they're trying to portray at all. Also, our arguments on freedom of choice were very poorly dealt with and they didn't touch it at all. And we acknowledge in medicine that even if we offer a patient a certain option which is medically not recommended, the patient has the full freedom to do that. A person can refuse surgery and go home to die. Why? Because we recognize autonomy. And that is the same thing we're doing here because we recognize the freedom of patients to decide how they want to live, even if it is medically not recommended. But that is even if. I am telling you, cannabis should be medically recommended as well. Okay, and now this is where I'm going to just show that everything they've said is just air. Firstly, all of the problems that they actually brought out were very vague. They said that, okay, it causes bronchitis and lung cancer, not in our model because we started off saying you can't smoke it, you have to use it through other methods like capsules. So, not that. Heightened mood, that is so vague. In fact, we were the first people who gave like an actual disadvantage of cannabis by saying that it's contraindicated in antipsychotic people, and contraindicated in psychotic people. We were the first person who brought that up, and we also mentioned that it is controlled to a great degree in our case, because now there's so much awareness, because there is so much discourse, because someone who is addicted can come and seek help like we did in suicide. Because of these reasons, we have far less people with psychoses being actually using it, because if you are diagnosed with psychosis, if you have a family history of psychosis, then why would a person do this if they're well aware that cannabis use can exacerbate it? And we showed that in our model, we're actually telling people that. People get to find out, the parents will be telling their children that, but that doesn't happen in their model. They brought other problems about, alcohol and smoking causes such a burden on our health sector, but that's going to happen with cannabis. No, it's not. Alcohol and smoking are far, far, far worse than cannabis is, because the amount of people affected by cannabis usage is so low. The numbers are so low, and the only people it's contraindicated are people with psychotic disorders. And as I said, we already gave sufficient responses to that. And despite all of this, they also brought this point about gateway drugs. We already gave you statistical evidence that people, if they can use cannabis, they won't go to opioids. I mean, why would you, if you have cannabis legally available, why would someone go break the law and use opium? Why? So finally, all of these arguments tie down to one simple question. What is your solution? We told you that there are so many people right now addicted to cannabis who can't seek help because it's illegal. What is your solution? Where do you make today Sri Lanka a better place? You do not, and that is why you should side with Side Proposition.
Thank you very much, Team Proposition, for winding up. So, where did that 1 hour go? Yes, we've come to the end of both rounds of the debate, and the adjudicators have kindly requested for 3 minutes while they confer amongst themselves. We'll welcome them on stage later for any comments and feedback, as well as to announce the winners. Before we move on to that, I think both teams deserve a loud round of applause. They did extremely well. I'm told that they're not yet in their final years. They are still in the preclinical years, both teams, and you can see they've read up so much and done their homework. They brought out statistics, humor, and breaking points of the opposition in full-blown confidence, almost akin to professionals. And I must say, on a personal note, they were almost as good as the Peradeniya team last year. So I won't take much more time. It's over to Professor Shehan Williams and Dr. Siri Rodrigo to give us the feedback and the winners.
And congratulations to both teams. Till the end, it was a very difficult task for us, trying to decide which team was going to win. Obviously, it was a very closely fought contest. I don't know whether you already guessed or you're still guessing or struggling to guess. I must say that for the proposing team, it was quite a difficult task, because even in terms of general opinion among most people, this is a topic where everybody feels cannabis shouldn't be legalized. But I think the college organizes these debates because we don't just brush it off like that, but we think, and we think of the pros, the cons, and we critically analyze the situation and realize that every situation is dynamic and we need to be informed when we make every decision and just not be led by our own emotions as such. So thank you, our dear future colleagues, but still very much a part of us, for informing us of all the issues that take place. In fact, I'm sure many of us learned certain facts which we may have to go back and look again, because all of that may not be really true. One fact for certain is that the college hasn't still been able to decriminalize homosexuality in a sense. So that is still to be done. So we, both of us, just considered the overall merits and the demerits of the debate and the debating ability of both teams. We looked at the style, the content that you presented, and the strategies that you used. We were very impressed with some of your strategies, and it was very inspiring and entertaining too. So again, well done. And by a small margin, the overall winners today are our team of ladies here. And many congratulations to them. It is an unanimous decision, and I hope the fact that we are males is not considered a conflict of interest. But we certainly think, and I think most of you would agree, that they did slightly better overall in terms of the debate. So well done, and congratulations to both teams. I think you all did exceptionally well.
Congratulations, Team Jayawardhanapura, a well-deserved win indeed. I cordially invite Dr. Gihan Abewardhana, President, Sri Lanka College of Psychiatrists, to present the trophy and certificates to the members of the two teams. First, the runner-up team. From University of Colombo, Ms. Nuha Kasim, Mr. Minul Doluweera, Mr. Lukman Shafi, and Ms. Druvin Kawas.
And now, members of the winning team, Team Sri Jayawardhanapura, Ms. Senara Vidanapathirana, Ms. Lakshika Vardaraja, Ms. Amira Isadeen, I courteously invite Dr. Gihan Abewardhana to present the trophy to the winning team. And sir, Dr. Gihan Abewardhana, sir, I courteously invite you once again on stage to present the certificates for our judges, Professor Shihan Williams and Dr. Asiri Rodrigo.
So, next on our agenda, we have a plenary lecture on recent advances in the field of dementia. It will be conducted by consultant psychiatrist Dr. Kapila Ranasinghe. And to chair the session, I'd like to kindly call upon Dr. Buddhi Jayasekara and Dr. Anuprabha Vikramasinghe. Over to you, sir and madam.
Good afternoon. Our next orator need no introduction to this esteemed audience, I suppose. Being a trainer and a college for most of the, trainer for most of us, including the other colleagues. Dr. Kapila Ranasinghe had done his specialist training as SR in St. Thomas and Guy's Rotation, UK. He had done many studies in old-age psychiatry and few chapters related to old-age psychiatry, and he had written the book Understanding Dementia. He had immensely contributed to the development of old age psychiatry services including the Sri Lanka's first and only psychogeriatric day center in NIMH. With the bursary awarded for the best service development globally in knowledge psychiatry offered by the Faculty of Old Age Psychiatry, Royal College of Psychiatrists in March 2016, East Midlands Conference Centre, Nottingham, UK. And he is a member and a senior examiner in Specialty Board of Geriatric Medicine, in addition to Board of Study in Psychiatry. Over to you, sir.
For the kind interaction. First of all, I'm thankful to my dear friend Gihan, the President and the Council for inviting me to do this lecture. He wanted me to do something interesting on an update for old age. Then he's the one who decided. I thought there are a lot of young people who will be benefited by learning about dementia, and some of us who are getting older will also benefit by learning how to manage it better ourselves, what is working and what is not working. See, this is the update. I'll go the first part, the assessment part, a bit faster, because we all know that early recognition is very important, mainly for counseling purposes and assessment of secondary or treatable courses, and advanced care planning and consideration of medical therapy. So, unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, a lot of people come quite late, and that really affects the prognosis of the cases. So, a tinge of suspicion in anyone who's presenting with memory impairment, any cognitive impairment, is important in clinical practices to prevent advancement of certain dementias. This is the diagnostic worked out that is established all over the world. First of all, establishing the correct diagnosis of dementia and determine the severity and looking for etiology, treatable causes, and assessment of risk, assessment for other associated problems. So, there are a lot of trainees who your assessment has to cover, diagnostic workout actually has to cover all these areas. So, it's a big area. I won't be able to cover within 30 minutes, but I will try to address. Now, other thing is that not every cognitive impairment is dementia. Cognitive impairment is not synonymous with dementia, and you have to carefully exclude other things like delirium, depression, and it's also normal to have certain level of memory impairment and new learning and reduced speed with aging. And we need to remember, mild cognitive impairment is not at the earliest stage of dementia in every case. The conversion rate to any form of dementia is actually 10% per year. So mild cognitive impairment can be pretty normal. That is the understanding current now. This is the diagnosis of dementia and DSM-5 and ICD-11. The major neurocognitive disorder is significant cognitive decline in at least one of the cognitive domains, complex attention, executive function, language, learning and memory, perceptual motor, or social cognitions. The decline must be based on both subjective and objective finding. This is the area that actually lacking in our part of the world, that we don't really objectify the cognitive impairment in our assessment. I'll come to that in later. And it should interfere with instrumental activities of daily living. Then one can also have minor or mild neurocognitive disorder without dementia. We call it the comprehensive assessment of dementia nowadays, and it should encompass all these areas of history, mental state examination, physical examination, appropriate investigation, cognitive assessment, functional assessment, social assessment, and other aspects of assessment. So it's a very detailed out assessment. But I thought because of the completion, the history has to be very thorough. And this is one area that a reliable informant is essential. And timeline of symptom presentation, pattern, and rate of progression actually gives an idea of what the dementia is. And similarly, cognitive domains affected itself suggest the type of dementia. Then functional impairment, both subjectively and objectively, and depression, other behavioral and psychological symptoms, risk factors, medication, risk assessment, education level, social, ethical, legal issues, you name it, or dementia. Technically, you can't do one assessment within 1 day. It's an ongoing assessment process. Dementia this is the difference between. So tentatively you can diagnose, have a differential diagnosis by taking the history, but you will not be able to come to conclusive diagnosis, even a working diagnosis with one session. And establishing functional impairment is one of the key factors in identifying dementia. A good history on the patient and reliable caregiver, family member is good enough, but it has to be complemented by validated tools. These are some of the tools that we use, like the Bristol Activities of Daily Living, Alzheimer's Disease Functional Assessment Scale, Disability Assessment for Dementia, right? To establish the functional impairment, we also can go do the basic activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. I will not read it out, but I'm sure all units that do dementia assessments carry out this. And now one need to understand the severity of dementia is based on functional impairment, not the domains of cognition impairment. So one can be very poor memory, but can be quite functional. So based on the activities of daily living functionality, we will be labeling them as mild, moderate or severe. Not based on screening tools either. So screening tools I'll come, or there are other tools to assess the level of dementia, but none of them are quite useful in clinical practices or even for legal practices. Then one thing that is actually more important in our part of the world, majority of patients come to us because of the behavioral symptoms, psychological and behavioral symptoms of dementia. And it constitutes the major component of the dementia symptoms, irrespective of which subtype. This is unfortunate. So because of the lack of awareness, they come with this. And these are the type of behavioral symptom clusters that come. One can get apathy, depression, agitation, aggression, psychosis, mania. So late onset, any mania can be actually dementia. Late onset aggression, one need to screen for dementia. Agitation, depression, these are well known and established fact, but most of the time we miss it. Early dementias can purely present with BPSD symptoms. It's associated with, BPSD is associated with greater functional impairment, institutionalization, accelerated dementia progression, and data caregiver stress, poor quality of life, and increases risk of death. More neuropathological markers of dementia are there whenever they are associated severe behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. Now this is, again, I thought of emphasizing more, the Cache country study in memory and aging, the 1 month prevalence of neuropsychiatric symptoms. Cognitively normal at old adults, 15% of them had it. Cognitive impairment to no dementia, 31%. And dementia had about 60%. So just because of there's, now this is making more difficult. Just because there are behavioral and psychological symptoms, it may not be dementia either. So old age is becoming more difficult as you refine and update more. This is our NIMH clinic. We have been kind of auditing our patient numbers, and we see large numbers have delusions, hallucinations, but after listening to my dear teacher, Dr. Abhay, I think some of the hallucinations can be normal. Again, so, but I didn't know that time. And irritability, it continues to be there. So we have to be careful, but then you have to have a differential diagnosis. So it's, when I was talking about geriatric medicines, they tend to think one diagnosis in aging people, whereas we psychiatrists have to have a bigger differential diagnosis in old age. And differential diagnosis can be, even for dementia, big. Around 40%, 1% is Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, then mostly PD. If there's more visual hallucinations than auditory hallucination, and DLB with more hallucination, delusion, and it could be delirium. We tend to forget also subacute delirium. That is delirium setting very slowly, and it not clearly apparent. And Parkinson's disease had complex health, and Huntington. These are major ones, but it's actually once you work out only, you will understand it's huge, right? And then assessing etiology for treatable cause, it's very important to have a very good history and examination and do appropriate investigation based on your history and examination findings. Other aspects to assess, and we tend to forget most of the time, is ability to drive and capacities. Recently, I came to Nigamdu 2 weeks back for a case that I assessed 2011 for capacity. Retrospectively, they asked. And legal issues, elder abuse, social and financial status, home environment, caregiver assessment, availability of services and support, and physical examination almost always depends on medical comment and could be normal, but look for features of reversible causes. Hypothyroidism is common in this part of especially among females. Now the understanding is hypothyroidism prevalence above age of 60 to 65 is 10 to 15% among Sri Lankan females. Neurosyphilis, intractable tumors, normal pressure hydrocephalus are also reversible causes. Look for cardiovascular, cardiometabolic risk factors, look for physical complications, bed sores, infection, disabilities, hearing and vision. Further evaluation of cognitive impairment has to be done once you suspect that the patient could be having dementia or if there's a comorbid dementia, right? And MM is the most commonly used cognitive evaluation tool. It has good sensitivity and specificity, and Montreal Cognitive Assessment of MOCA, again, is excellent sensitive for detecting mild neurocognitive disorder. In both MMSC and Montreal Cognitive Assessment are validated and highly used in our setups. And Minicog is also validated in Sinhalese, but it's highly sensitive, but specificity is slightly low. But remember, these are screening tools. Sometimes in our busy practice, they also help you to categorize the mild severity, but they are not concluding test. They are screening and kind of for service-oriented purposes, they can be used to label patients. Right? But normal scoring cognitive testing cannot rule out dementia. We have seen many cases like that. When uncertain, more extensive neuropsychological testing is recommended. Now, I think that's why either you do it extended cognitive assessment, or in Sri Lanka, we are licensed to repeated battery for assessment of neuropsychological status. For the last 2 years, through the college, we have the original Pearson R-bands tools in our unit, and all the few other cognitive tools, they are validated. And this tool is very interesting tool. It's a brief individual test measuring attention, language, visuospatial, constructional abilities, and immediate and delay memory. It actually is capable of differentiating what is Alzheimer's, what is vascular, even late onset psychotic illnesses, schizophrenia-related cognitive impairment, everything can be done. So you all are invited to learn and use it through our Digayu old age clinic. Then investigation, biochemical, radiological and genetic investigation only modestly increase the diagnostic accuracy for common dementias. Important for ruling out rare and treatable causes, laboratory testing, full blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, TSH, vitamin B12. So they all are important because the B12 deficiencies are again common due to religious reasons that are prevalent in Sri Lanka. So we sometimes supplement B12 and they rapidly improve. Consider other laboratory testing based on specific concerns only. Then structural neuroimaging. Now, actually almost all the guidelines recommend routing structural imaging. But this recommendation, first recommendation was by the Americans, and neuroimaging helps to rule out treatable causes, STH, tumor, NPH, treatable mass, and certain subtypes of dementias. MRI without contrast media is preferred. And if you are ordering it, you have to order the type that you order, the MRI brain dementia protocol. That's for normal screening. And it actually volumetric assessment of the hippocampal formation and give the idea whether it's actually Alzheimer's or non-Alzheimer's. And CT without contrast when MRI is not available or contraindicated can be used effectively. This I'll show you a few pictures from our case. The multi-infarct dementias we have seen, CT versus MRI. Then normal pressure hydrocephalus. I'll not go details. CT scan of mixed dementia with white matter changes and Lacuna infarcts. And specialized investigation. They are not usually recommended routine practice, but they help diagnosis, subtypes, and it would change management. Diagnosis is uncertain. We have also again go for specialized investigation. And CSF testing, I think some of my trainees are here. We have done thorough testing when we were there. It rapidly progressive symptoms, CSF prelocytis, CSF IG index, oligoclonal band might indicate an autoimmune disease. We have cases, they detect a few cases. Even 2 months back, we detect one. And prion disease test for CSF14 and 13. We cannot do that in Sri Lanka, unfortunately. But post-mortem, we did a few cases. Some of them came, almost all of them are negative. And it's better to liaise with the neurologist at this stage. For Alzheimer's disease, these are for academic purposes. None of them are done in Sri Lanka. But this Alzheimer's screening biomarkers can be positive in very old, so they don't have a real clinical value in day-to-day practices. For academic purposes, I included, though the NICE mentions them. And functional neuroimaging. Now, functional neuroimaging is used in some of the high-tech centers, mainly fluorodeoxyglucose positron-emitting tomography. It's not available in Sri Lanka, but in India, Singapore, it's available. It predicts development of AD in patients with MCI, useful in staging AD. This is the thing, if somebody is even scoring very low in their cognitive assessment, we say somebody is interested in whether they are actually losing their cognitive functions, one can undergo R bands and maybe perhaps Brown's attention scales. Right? In Sri Lanka, both those scales are actually available in our NIMH as well as in private sector. But still they are normal or inconclusive, so one can actually go to Singapore and get it done. Or Mumbai, right? Then perfusion SPECT. SPECT scans are available in Sri Lanka in the private scan, but for legal purpose, I have only watched 1 or 2 actually. Then amyloid PET, mainly for research interest, but again, it does not correlate well with symptom severity. Negative scan can exclude AD and also can differentiate from frontotemporal dementia. This is the interesting. So, especially there are a lot of medical legal issues and issues related to capacity. These things can become handy in very high-profile cases. Then functional neuroimaging continued. Especially Lewy body dementia of Parkinson's disease. It's become useful. I'm not going to read everything, but the important thing is, now you all must have seen some of the cases of vascular Parkinsonism had been labeled, right, as Parkinson's disease, and they have also vascular dementia features. And a neurologist starts levodopa therapy, and the person goes berserk, right? I can see the very senior psychiatrist now. So this is a very terrible situation. But this is where the functional neuroimaging, why almost all the Lewy body dementias now, before starting levodopa therapy, they do functional neuroimaging. It actually helps them to identify whether necrostriatal pathway is intact, whether any vascular lesions are existing or non-existing. And FDG PET is the kind of a more clinically used one. Signal patterns of hypermetabolism associated with specific clinical syndromes can be also used in frontotemporal dementias. The frontotemporal dementia is a very difficult situation to identify because there are many subtypes of frontotemporal dementia, very rapidly progressing and very clinically challenging for any psychiatrist who are trying to handle the BPSD. So now they suggest functional neuroimaging with early onset frontotemporal dementias. Then genetic testing is not recommended in clinical practices, but I thought of mention for research, but the NICE continue to mention genetic testing should be considered in patients with multiple family members diagnosed with AD at a young age. in an autosomal dominant pattern. Because they can actually, in most of the developed countries, they become entitled for social benefits at a very young age. They can retire early. Then EG, many appear normal in early disease of irrespective of the type of dementia, and slow enough reducing EG complexity and syndrome can be seen in disease progression. It's only a biomarker, not mainly used, but I'll come to rush to the management. Management is mainly pharmacology and non-pharmacological. Alzheimer's disease. The first line is acetylcholinesterase limiters. It delays the onset of neuropsychiatric syndrome, but not effective when it has agitation. Then memantine may reduce the development of agitation, but will not reduce if the agitation is already started. And treating neuropsychiatric symptoms, as you know, psychotropics, depending on the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. Then frontotemporal dementia is the more challenging type. We psychiatrists and the world still accept we are helpless in there. So counseling, education, stimulation activity, safety, advanced care planning is the main line of treatment. Pharmacological treatment, no memory enhancers work. But we sometimes try, maybe they are actually misdiagnosed, but treatment can be tried to handle the behavioral and psychological symptoms. And when you read Oxford and other articles, they say protein-specific. These are trials still. Some 1 or 2 promising trials, leurocelide, very rare drugs. But I try to search whether anywhere else the world, in Japan they are trying. That's the only country. Then vascular dementia, important to identify vascular dementia correctly because no medication specifically approved by the FDA. And multi-infarct concept led to use of vasodilatation, most widely produce minimal effect and respect the modification. Now one of the beauties of the lifestyle changes and modifying vascular risk is almost all the cases of vascular dementias, the progression can be halted, or the slowed down, if you address them very carefully. And homocysteine and cobalamin interaction has to be very careful because when you are in vascular dementia, a lot of dietary supplements are recommended to reduce the progression. You will understand now the citicoline had come, then there are B complexes, homocysteine supplementation, CoQ10 supplementation, everything. Though the vascular dementia progression can be reduced, it's a very expensive business. Because the lifestyle modification plus the supplementary and dietary modification itself is very, very difficult. Then Parkinson's disease dementia, pharmacological treatment, dopaminergic medication, acetylcholinesterase medication, non-competitive NMDR antagonist, non-adrenergic medication. Because of acetylcholinergic medication, they said rivastigmine has slightly better, but again the evidence is not very clear. And there are a few emerging treatments. Will increase the focus on modifying underlying mechanism associated dementia and cognitive decline, enhancing neuroprotection, facilitating neuroplasticity. Now they are talking about neuroprotection for all the Parkinson's disease patients, early start of agonists and antioxidants, any Lewy body disease, that may work. And managing BPSD, I thought I'll focus a bit, pharmacological and non-pharmacological again. And the recommendation is almost all the guys behavioral measures should try it first. Then antipsychotic, risperidone, aripiprazole, and quetiapine is approved by many organizations worldwide to treat agitation. Then SSRIs. Management of apathy, evidence is very limited. This is where maybe your grandfather is very poorly split, you can use their PlayStation to stimulate the grandfather, grandmother. That works, according to the research evidence. Now, I actually got fascinated. It's not a bad idea to start playing games at old age. and OT activities. So I suggest also senior, when you are getting better, we should buy a PlayStation. There's good evidence to support that. And smart devices perhaps. And OT activities, stimulation, creative activities, cooking, Montessori methodology, so that we had to start doing all the things that we were doing childhood. Then pharmacotherapy for apathy is quite difficult. Acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, not that. But one moderate improvement is methyl, methamphetamine, the so-called, the drugs that child psychiatrists are using more, is sometimes give promising results. So when behavioral management for apathy is, I think everything child psychiatrists are doing with their patients, learning disabilities, attention deficit disorders may work. Antidepressant mixed results, I will not go for details. And management of anxiety, anything that works for young age, for anxiety, is likely to work for elderly. I will not place because the time constraint. One of the things actually very establishing and restoring the sleep and sleep hygiene has no one to reduce anxiety in elderly. And good therapeutic relationship, education, relaxation training, CBT and behavior therapy and medication. So anxiety again predicts poor prognosis of the whole syndrome. So addressing them is actually quite important. Again, the management of mania, one has to do thorough evaluation, and low-dose antipsychotics are recommended. Mood stabilizers, all types of mood stabilizers work, but very cautious use of lithium is recommended. Interestingly, these can be completely dementia-related mania itself works for lithium, valproate, but the evidence for lamotrigine in mania is very low. This is the area I actually wanted to talk. Cognitive rehabilitation now is intended to improve everyday function by reinforcing, strengthening or restoring previously learned patterns of behavior and or developing new patterns of cognitive activity or compensatory strategies. Now, this is why actually I thought of, rather than showing, one area that actually we have not handled very well, but actually in our Deegayu Center, we have started doing cognitive rehabilitation for dementia persons. It not only improves their functional capacity, improve their well-being, but even cognition. We are doing small scale, our occupational therapists have been trained, and we do reminiscence therapy as well as rehabilitation. We usually buy available puzzles and other building blocks and things that are used in preschool, but they actually work very well. We have seen with the cognitive rehabilitation, you can actually very easily look at how cognitive rehabilitation of elderly are done in YouTubes now. Anyone who, a lot of psychiatrists and trainees, you are interested in elderly cognitive rehabilitation, it's not a big thing. All you have to do is read after assessing the patient and carry out, plan it and do it. And so it has to be done in a very organized and structured manner that and making sure that the families and the patients are not bored. They can get easily bored. I remember Dr. Jayan Mendis, who started rehabilitation in Angode is here. I'm thankful that we have taken it more forward to the old date. It works. Now, then there was an argument sometime that rehabilitation done for schizophrenic patients usually lasts less than 6 months. That is also true for old age. Cognitive rehabilitation and rehabilitation-like activities have to be continued for the rest of their life. So any evidence, the evidence for cognitive rehabilitation and rehabilitation of patients for major mental illnesses like schizophrenia and other neurodegenerative, they don't last longer. So this is the challenging area. So we had to continue to advise them to read, engage in social activities, play, social interaction. So training, this is the challenge. But I think we are successful. We are managing the patient. And then compensatory techniques. You all are aware. So by the time that they will be presenting you to, some of their cognitive dementias were significantly damaged to a level that rehabilitation is not feasible. So to overcome those issues, compensatory techniques can be told, like using memory cards, calendars, boards, and rails. So it's actually, I'm not going to detail. There's good evidence. Compensatory techniques also help survival and reduces hospital admissions and clinic visits. So these compensatory techniques and cognitive rehabilitation are best done at home actually. If you look at, because there are a lot of trainees here, I thought of hospital-based cognitive rehabilitation are lesser results compared to the home-based. So this is one argument that we should take out, this learning of giving rehabilitation to the community actually. We should start sending up occupational therapies, community nurses and giving more. And restorative techniques. The restorative techniques are quite expensive. This is what very high, I didn't show you because I thought the time constraint. Restorative techniques are well planned, the cognitive domains have to be identified, and specific tasks to improve the neuroplasticity of that area has to be carried out. Now, computer-based restorative techniques are done by few neuropsychologists in Sri Lanka. I'm sure you will be there in private hospital they are done. But we have not really embarked in our government clinic because of the financial issues and facilities. But again, these things are kind of very restorative techniques, evidence basis minimal, but the case histories, centers with good results are rampant all over the world. It's the dedication of the team that actually yields good results in this area. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually coming to the end of the talk. Everybody talks of pharmacotherapy. But you will see that when you are managing dementia, right? When dementia is a progressive disorder, treatment starts stopping. And to make sure that you become helpless, you should embark cognitive rehabilitation, compensatory and psychosocial measures from the beginning of the treatment. And there's good evidence and good clinical experience to support that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that excellent presentation. Because we have very limited time left, we will welcome just one or two questions from the audience.
Just a question.
Yes. Now this is a tricky area. You all are aware that some of the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors were start licensed for Alzheimer's. But then recent evidence said that there are a large number of mixed dementias. Right? Even mixed dementia, they works. Because the risk factors for vascular dementia and Alzheimer's are same. And research world is a bit artificial, so in clinical practice, sometimes starting, where for example donepezil, actually it improves the functionality. Now, though when you read meta-analysis for systematic review for memantine, it's recommended for moderate to severe or end-stage dementia. But there's good evidence again, from the practice-based evidences, it is not so. So now the recommendation is not to stop the donepezil or rivastigmine, but then to add on. So I agree with your question. I have seen many cases where without even cognitive assessment, where there are good history taken, sometimes people start. Then I have very few evidence to augment, as Shahan will agree, whether donepezil can be used to augment memory functioning in late onset depression. This is a dodgy area, I guess. Just because there's case reports, these are very new developments. And I have seen the trend I am witnessing. I would say if there's a real direct benefit of functionality, we may have to continue it. Sometimes you end up now this is the area that I recently had a debate with the physicians and neurologists. They said, okay, you start treating depression. After a while, the functionality does not improve. That's the point we have to actually, in depression, start the assessment for dementia. Comorbidity is the norm in old age. Though we have learned depression, dementia, psychosis, separately, it does not happen in real world. So a lot of these cases are actually comorbid cases. I personally have managed a lot of cases by adding memory enhancers. They do well. And it makes worse actually. I didn't go to that detail. Late onset depression is the prelude to dementia. And if you do functional neuroimaging or a MRI, you will see a lot of periventricular ischemia in late onset depressions, and specifically in very late onset, that is above 75. And they recommend all the cardiac rehabilitation supplements, the antioxidant cascade. This is a big area, very costly and troublesome. I can see some of the pharmaceutical companies have come here targeted with that molecules. Here, so, but they do work. Emerging evidence for the antioxidants and the cardiac rehabilitative molecules to work on the brain vasculature is good. And that's why the vascular dementia management is a science plus art. It was a good question. Thank you. I think I didn't touch that area.
Thank you, sir. We will now conclude the session. Let me invite Dr. Buddhi Jayasekara to give in the certificate of appreciation.
Thank you, Madam and Sir, for chairing the session.